Laureates, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Riksdag, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the Swedish Parliament, the Riksdag. In this room, the second chamber, decisions about universal suffrage, the Constitution, and other for Sweden important reforms have been taken. These were vital decisions that led to the democratic reforms in Sweden. For we must never forget that democracy isn't something we can take for granted. It needs to be continuously nurtured and updated by all of us. Democracy is a shared responsibility. One of the most important building blocks for a democracy is a strong civil society. A civil society that encourages its people to take action, both as a group and as an individual pioneers. A strong civil society embedded in the freedom of speech, individual courage, and innovation. The Right Livelihood Award is awarded to those brave individuals and organizations who in exemplary way are working towards a better, more democratic and sustainable world. We are here today to honor Mr. Huang Ming, Ms. Jacqueline Moudeina, Ms. Ina May Gaskin, and the GRAIN organization, who have been awarded the 32nd Right Livelihood Awards. In 4 different continents and with 4 different approaches, you are working towards a more viable world. We must remember that the solution to a better future can't be achieved by using one single recipe. The solution will differ from place to place, from field to field, and from time to time. However, the final goal, equal rights and equal opportunities, must be the same for all of us. Today, we see how important initiative, integrity, and courage is, and what you can achieve when you work for a cause you strongly believe in. Dear laureates, you will shortly receive your award. As Deputy Speaker of the Riksdag, it's an honor for me to open this special ceremony. On behalf of the Swedish Riksdag, I would like to welcome you here today. I thank you for all the important work you have done and wish you the best of luck in your continuing good work. Thank you for your attention.
Madam Speaker, laureates, colleagues and friends. My name is Eva-Lena Jansson. I'm a member of the Parliament representing the Social Democratic Party. I'm also the chair of Society for the Right of the Livelihood Award in the Swedish Parliament, SÄRLA. And I'm so pleased to see you all here tonight to this happy occasion where we get to honor people who work for a more just, equal and truly sustainable planet. I hope you will learn some new things and enjoy the speeches and the music this evening. In order for all of us to fully experience everything tonight, I will ask you kindly to turn off your mobile phones and to not take any photographs with flashes during the actual ceremony. During the intermission, the laureates will stay up here for you to be able to take really good pictures on this scene here. We also ask the photographers to not move too close to the stage, since that will disturb our guests and the filming for TV and webcast. May I now present the founder of the President of Resonance Foundation in Switzerland, the pianist Elisabeth Sombar. The aims of her foundation is to offer concerts in the places usually not having concert. In hospitals, retirement, nursing homes, institutions for disabled, etc. And to start to manage resonance schools where there is no fee for the student and also give masterclass and workshop. Welcome, Elisabeth Sombar. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for this wonderful opening of tonight's ceremony. Honorable Speaker, members of Parliament, dear award recipients, friends of the Right Livelihood Award. This year, our award family mourns the loss of three outstanding women: Rachel Avneri from Israel, Deka Ibrahim Abdi and Wangari Maathai from Kenya. Losing them has deprived us not only of their inspiration and wisdom, but also of two features too often forgotten in our struggles for a better world: joy and passion. The joy and passion they radiated in their quest for peace and for a healthy environment defied all obstacles. It reminded us that, while our path may be dangerous and difficult, it is also a road which brings its own rewards: the thrill and delight of working for the greater good, even when the odds against us are many. The passion and joy of Rachel Avneri, Deka Ibrahim Abdi, and Wangari Maathai are already sorely missed. Please join me in a minute of silence and gratitude for these three remarkable lives. Thank you very much. We are now the guardians of all future generations of life on Earth, facing challenges unprecedented in human history. We may feel that we're doing our best to meet these challenges, but in a crisis, as Winston Churchill reminded us, it is not enough to do your best. You have to do what is necessary. Our failure to do what is necessary threatens to make growing parts of our planet increasingly uninhabitable, handing our children and their children a world of radically diminished options. The evidence for this threat is now high school science, recognized by an unprecedented scientific consensus, accepted by governments, by business, denied only by those who cannot bear to see their old worldview collapse. No area of life will be untouched by our failure to do what is necessary. Climate chaos, biodiversity loss, and other environmental crises will destroy much of what we have achieved and make everything we want to achieve, from ending hunger and misery to building a peaceful world, much harder, if not impossible. The respected IUCN now sees climate chaos growing even faster than expected, with negative impacts greater than the worst predictions. Our actions in the next few years, for even the Pentagon expects a global energy crisis by 2015, will determine whether or not we will preserve a planet similar to that on which civilization developed and to which life on Earth is adapted. For nature cannot be outvoted, does not negotiate, and provides no bailout or rescue packages. Sir Nicholas Stern warns that a continued refusal to do what is necessary to limit climate chaos will bring a serious risk of global war. Studies by the US and UK defense establishments agree. To quote one Pentagon study, once again, warfare will define human life. And how will rich societies react when unstoppable millions of climate refugees arrive from failed states where they can no longer survive? Just when our wealth bubbles evaporate because the real economy can no longer externalize environmental costs and climate chaos destroys productive capacities. The Club of Rome business as usual scenario outlined almost 40 years ago has largely come to pass, with growing resource scarcities, the so-called global peak everything, now looming. GDP economic growth may continue, but will increasingly become uneconomic growth, to use the term our award recipient, Professor Herman Daly, coined. spent on damage repair and prevention, with little left to improve and spread material living standards, for the same resources and labor cannot be used twice. The unavoidable radical transformation of our systems of production and consumption will not be cheap, easy, or quick, but the changes required are still possible and affordable if we do not delay any longer. The new industrial revolution required can offer huge entrepreneurial opportunities and create many millions of new jobs. We need no miraculous new inventions to get it started. We need only put the best available policies and institutions in place in order to give the right incentives for societies, markets, and technologies to move in the right direction. History shows that with policy leadership, transformative change can come very fast. To quote Al Gore, all of a sudden, change that everybody thought was impossible became matter of fact. In 1941, it was absurd to think that the United States could build 1,000 airplanes a month to fight World War II. By 1943, that was a real small number. We are now all called on to become leaders. We must all acquire the basic skills and knowledge which this requires, or we will have failed our children and all future generations who depend on us to change course before the planet we have borrowed from them has been irretrievably damaged. In times of upheaval, people from all walks of life often find themselves called by their fellow citizens to take responsibility for the governance and renaissance of their localities, regions, and countries until a new order has been built. This award is for those who are ready when that call comes. The development of solar energy is the most important technological challenge of our age. Each day, the sun radiates 15,000 times more energy onto the surface of the Earth than we humans need. This award highlighted the need for soft energy path already in the 1980s through our recipients Amory and Hunter Lovins, whose work continues to be at the forefront of resource efficiency and redesigning energy systems. In 1999, with Hermann Scheer, we awarded the main driver behind Germany's exemplary feed-in tariff legislation to speed up renewable energy production. A few years later, we honored Martin Green from Australia, one of the leading scientists developing solar cell efficiency. And today we are here to celebrate the vision and work of a pioneering businessman working to transform his country. Huang Ming is a global solar entrepreneur showing how business can help overcome the energy and climate crisis. His aim is to speed up the transition from fossil and nuclear energy to renewables in China and abroad. Many share this aim, but few have been as successful in pursuing it as Huang Ming. With his company Himin, he has become a world leader in solar thermal energy. He has developed some of the most advanced solar technologies, ensuring their outreach and mass application. He is setting an example to the world with his Dessous Solar Valley, one of the world's largest solar city development projects, which attracts up to 4,000 visitors a day, including developers, city planners, and educators. Besides his technological leadership and business record in promoting solar energy, Huang Ming was a key player in getting China's renewable energy law adopted in 2005. China is now the biggest emitter of CO2 in the world, but also has the biggest installed capacity of renewable energy, to which Huang Ming has contributed significantly. China, he says, can do so much more, and it needs to do much more. His work shows how China can develop the solution to the unprecedented global challenge and threat of climate chaos, how the rising dragon can become a solar dragon. The jury applauds Huang Ming for his outstanding success in the development and mass deployment of cutting-edge technologies for harnessing solar energy, thereby showing how dynamic emerging economies can contribute to resolving the global crisis of anthropogenic climate change. It is with very great pleasure that I present the 2011 Right Livelihood Honorary Award to Huang Ming. The tyranny of Hissène Habre's dictatorship in Chad is one of the many sinister examples of the 20th century where the victims are still waiting for the perpetrator to be held accountable. Jacqueline Moudeina is their voice for justice, among the first women to register as lawyers in her country, and one of the few who found the courage to take on the case of Habre's victims. She has survived a murder attempt and stood up against defamation and silence to win justice for thousands of Chadians who were tortured, imprisoned, and killed by a brutal regime. An untiring human rights advocate, she has pleaded and worked with both African and European courts and decision-makers to have Habré arrested and extradited from his refuge in Senegal so that he finally faces trial. Even though Senegal still refuses to prosecute or extradite him, it is thanks to Jacqueline Moudeina that his atrocities are not forgotten, and that there is hope for the victims that justice will prevail. Jacqueline Moudeina has been an African pioneer in the complex field of international criminal law. But she is not only working at the highest judicial level. Much of her groundbreaking work is done at the grassroots, together with her colleagues at the Chadian Association for the Promotion and Defense of Human Rights. Their programs include creating a national monitoring system on prison conditions and training prisoners and prison wardens, ending the slavery of children who are sold in markets to work as agricultural laborers, educating about legal means to prevent child marriages, and seeking compensation for environmental damage from the Chad-Cameroon oil and pipeline project. The jury recognizes Jacqueline Moudeina for her tireless efforts at great personal risk to win justice for the victims of the former dictatorship in Chad and to increase awareness and observance of human rights in Africa. It is with very great pleasure that I present the 2011 Right Livelihood Award to Jacqueline Moudeina. In recent years, we've been alerted to the devastating impact of food price speculation and the buying up of large areas of farmed land by foreign investors. Small farmers have lost their livelihoods. Seed diversity has been destroyed. Soaring food prices have sparked riots and worsened famines. Many of the facts and figures underlying such reports are based on evidence collected, analyzed, and provided by GRAIN, a small non-profit organization. For 2 decades, GRAIN has been a key player in the global movement to challenge corporate power over people's food and livelihoods and to promote food sovereignty. GRAIN monitors and analyzes trends that affect farmers and rural communities' control over their livelihoods. They publish data which is used by the media, civil society movements, and institutions like the World Bank, and they foster public debate on topics such as intellectual property rights, genetic engineering, and biodiversity. GRAIN not only documents this global farmland grab, which is characterized by a lack of transparency and little or no democratic control. It also helps mobilize resistance against it. Movement building, networking, and capacity sharing are integral to their work, which is why GRAIN's staff and partners have repeatedly crossed paths and built alliances with many Right Livelihood laureates like MST in Brazil, Pat Mooney in Canada, Vandana Shiva in India, and Tevoldre Gebre in Ethiopia. The jury honors GRAIN for their worldwide work to protect the livelihoods and rights of farming communities and to expose the massive purchases of farmland in developing countries by foreign financial interests. It is with very great pleasure that I present the 2011 Right Livelihood Award to GRAIN, represented here tonight by Henk Hobbelink and René Velvet. This prize has been presented to couples before, but never with a time gap of 31 years. In 1980, Stephen Gaskin received one of the 2 first ever Right Livelihood Awards for his work with Plenty International. Today we're here to pay tribute to his wife, Ina May Gaskin, and to acknowledge every woman's right to choose freely and fearlessly how our children are born. Ina May Gaskin has revived and modernized the ancient practice of midwifery, which places the mother at the center and does not see pregnancy and childbirth as a medical condition. Over the last century, prompted by the prophets, medicated birth and cesarean sections provide for the powerful players in the health industry. The medical establishment in the USA began to advise more and more frequently against natural birth, with other countries following suit. To counter this development, Ina May Gaskin founded the Farm Midwifery Center in 1971. While the USA as a whole has seen an extreme rise in cesarean sections, rates of up to 30% in the new millennium, Ina May Gaskin and her colleagues, many of whom she trained herself, reported a 2% rate, even though they delivered many multiple birth and breech babies. Ina May Gaskin is a teacher and awareness raiser, a best-selling author and activist. She has taught and lectured around the globe. Currently, some of her main activities are the Safe Motherhood Quilt project, which aims to lower the rising maternal death rate in her home country by creating a system for reporting, classifying, and counting the maternal death in the US and reviewing and analyzing their causes. And also an information campaign about the risks to the lives of mother and child when using drugs to induce labor. The jury honors Ina May Gaskin for her whole life's work teaching and advocating safe, women-centered childbirth methods that best promote the physical and mental health of mother and child. It is with very great pleasure that I present the 2011 Right Livelihood Award to Ina May Gaskin. In conclusion, I hope that what you take home with you tonight is some of the joy and passion I talked about earlier. The joy in seeing that solutions to our challenges do exist, that joy in knowing that what you do is not only right, but also bears fruit, personal and for us all, and the passion to continue your work. Tonight, we celebrate human rights, biodiversity, entrepreneurship, and health, a secure future for our children, and justice as guiding principles in our livelihoods. Not just as a vision for the future, but manifested in the work and dedication of this year's award recipients, and of course that of our former laureates. I already mentioned Stephen Gaskin, our first laureate ever, who is here with us tonight, thanks to his wonderful wife. I'm also very pleased that Alan Ware, who received the prize in 2009, could join us for the celebration. Alan's work with parliamentarians for nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament brought him to Stockholm, and it's always a great pleasure to see laureates of different award generations meet and interact to support and strengthen each other. Alan? There are many who make this award thrive and grow, and I would like to thank all of them for their contributions. The Swedish Parliament and the Association for the Right Livelihood Award in Parliament, my colleagues on the board, jury and council of the Right Livelihood Award Foundation, our nominators and partner organizations, the artists and all the staff who make this evening possible, and of course especially also our partners, circle of friends and other donors, without whom this award could not continue to exist. Let me conclude with these words of Wangari Maathai. Despite all the constraints you may face, all the lack of the good things that many of us look for, dedicating oneself to the common good of society, to the environment, to democratic principles and to peace is itself a great reward. Sometimes it is not recognized, sometimes not pleasant, but there is a personal satisfaction, a feeling that you have lived your life to the full, that you've been a productive, a useful, and a valuable member of the greater community of the living. It is your future. Take it, work for it, and devote your life to it, so that you too may pass a better world to your children. Thank you very much.
young musician, Alice Power. She's 10 years old and lives in Sweden. She studies in the Lilla Akademien, the music school of Sweden. Her mother is Russian, and we thought, therefore, to play for you tonight together a piece from Tchaikovsky. But first, Alice will play for us a Bach Invention Due Voci.
For those of you who want to take the picture of the laureates, now it's the time. Outside this hall, lingonberry juice and vegetarian wraps is now served. A trumpet signal will tell you when it's time to move into the chamber again in about 20 minutes. Enjoy.
So we are back. Okay. Yeah. Please take your seat. Lite upp också. My name is Roland Utbult. I'm a member of parliament and representing the Christian Democrats. In April of this year, a new book entered the market, Birth Matters, a Midwife's Manifesto. It examines the industry of delivering babies and promotes a renewal of confidence in a woman's natural ability to give birth. The author says that if we could succeed with such a renewal, it would give transformative possibilities for individual families and for societies at large. The following words were published on a website called Scandinavian Moms. My heart skipped a beat when I got an invitation to her lecture in Gothenburg, Sweden, where she will lecture on Thursday, that's tomorrow. She is an amazing woman that inspires women all around the world to realize the benefits and beauty of natural unassisted birth and the value of good supporting during labor. She inspires women, doulas, nurses, midwives, and doctors to take a good look at their work and what they can do better. I now want to welcome the author, the midwife, activist, and protector of new human beings' good start in life, Ina May Gaskin. The floor is yours.
Madam Speaker, members of Parliament, fellow laureates, dear friends, it is a great honor to have been chosen as the first midwife to receive the Right Livelihood Award. In accepting this award, I feel a deep sense of responsibility to my fellow midwives throughout the world. Most of us necessarily share an awareness of powerful forces that now threaten the continued existence of the profession of midwifery in many parts of the world. Rates of cesarean section are rising rapidly in most countries, far beyond the upper limits recommended by the World Health Organization. As cesarean rates increase, rates of maternal death and serious injury rise as well, and women's fears of birth increase. At the same time, time-honored knowledge and skills begin to vanish. I have visited private hospitals in Brazil where the cesarean rate was 95% because women and their doctors had become so afraid of the normal process of birth that cesarean became the default. When surgical and technological interventions in birth become the norm rather than the exception, the profession of midwifery loses its basis for existence, and obstetrics itself no longer encompasses the skills and knowledge that were once considered essential competencies of the profession. I'm speaking of the skills and knowledge necessary for assisting vaginal breech birth, the birth of a second twin, the ability to manually assess fetal weight, to distinguish between normal labor pain and pain that warns of complication, to determine the position of the baby in the womb, to change it when it's unfavorable, and even to accurately diagnose pregnancy. To explain what I mean by this last mentioned skill, we in the US have already come to the point of discovering several cases of false pregnancy, diagnosed only after a woman's abdomen was opened for cesarean. An order of mistake that could hardly have been imagined 2 or 3 decades ago, when physicians' education and manual skills was still considered important. The shrugging off of traditional knowledge in the US had progressed to the point that by the 1990s, the 2 major obstetric textbooks no longer included any reference to the phenomenon of false pregnancy, also called pseudocyesis, even though it has always been known to exist in humans as well as other mammals. Only a country which has become superstitious in its use of technology could imagine that the use of imaging technologies could eliminate the need for teaching traditional manual diagnostic skills and all of the phenomena that occur in women's reproductive lives. The history of birth in the US during the 20th century illustrates well how essential a strong midwifery profession is if women are not to be held within a web of fear concerning their body's supposed defects when it comes to giving birth. The elimination of the profession of midwifery in the US in the early 20th century paved the way for a factory model of hospital-based maternity care that by the mid-century had 2/3 of all babies pulled from their mothers' bodies with forceps. Such a radical overuse of forceps did not happen in countries in which the value of a strong midwifery profession was recognized. With no midwives present in hospitals to instruct medical students in the wise ways of nature, men with the least understanding of the conditions necessary for women to give birth in a humane way soon came to believe that birth was necessarily a brutal and bloody affair, and that human females actually represented a serious failure on the part of nature, one that could only be remedied by routine use of technology and medication. Now, the profit motive really began to emerge vis-a-vis birth, and fear, greed, and ignorance have combined to make a nasty brew, as well as a witch hunt against midwives who work according to the rhythms of nature. The belief soon grew that babies would be most safely born when the mother's body was intentionally injured in order to free the baby, with a further rationale that such an injury would prevent worse injuries that would otherwise occur. Such myths, unfortunately, are perpetuated through Hollywood films, which usually focus on birth complications for dramatic value, while physiological birth is not depicted because of taboos against showing the relevant portions of the female body. As one of the mothers who knew there was nothing wrong with my body, and that the birth of my first child by forceps had been unnecessary, risky for me and my baby, with no discernible benefit, and psychologically harmful as well, I was left to find an escape route for myself for my next pregnancies. This dilemma prompted me to arrange for my own midwifery education, as I was unaware that any other way was available. And this was an arrangement that I was able to accomplish with the timely help of 4 physicians who also saw the need for midwives in our country. Free to learn from any sources that I considered relevant, I learned from non-literate traditional midwives, from old books and animals, as well as from kind physicians. From the beginning of the Farm Midwifery Center, my colleagues and I placed women's needs at the center of our policy making and found that this way of organizing care yielded huge benefits for our babies as well as their mothers. We learned how to prevent complications by providing good antenatal care, and we developed practical methods for preventing unnecessary cesareans and inductions of labor. Looking around, I found some other midwifery services backed by supportive physicians in other parts of the world with outcomes that were nearly identical to ours. The midwives who worked with the late Dr. John Stevenson in South Australia, those who worked with Dr. Alfred Rockenschaub in Vienna between the mid-60s and the mid-80s, and those still working with Dr. Tadashi Yoshimura in Okazaki City, Japan, all reported cesarean rates well under 5%, with good newborn outcomes, just like ours. This was especially interesting since we hadn't previously been aware of each other's existence. Unfortunately, in each case, these physicians, instead of being saluted by their peers, were treated as if they were hopelessly out of tune with the times and therefore irrelevant. We need to honor these men who are still writing and teaching anyone willing to listen. Now that many industrialized countries are reporting cesarean rates of 30% or more, despite the fact that midwives have always been accepted members of maternity care staff, it's important to recognize other factors that drive up rates of intervention in birth. Popular culture, the profit motive, fear, prudery, and ignorance all play a role and should be addressed. What is often missed is that excessive cesarean rates have other negative consequences than the loss of midwifery and obstetrical knowledge and skills. Simply put, as rates rise beyond 15 to 20%, more women die from complications such as pulmonary embolism, infection, hemorrhage, and a sharp increase in placental complications in subsequent pregnancies. None of the countries with the highest cesarean rates can report low maternal death rates. This is especially true of the US, where women now face at least twice the chance of dying from pregnancy-related causes as their mothers did. In California, between 1996 and 2006, the maternal death rate tripled, with much of the increase being attributed to an excess of cesareans. Don't expect the US to report these telling facts with any accuracy, though, because the current lack of an infrastructure that requires and produces accurate and consistent reporting and analysis of maternal deaths means that the official maternal mortality figures represent possibly only a third to a half of the actual numbers. To avoid facing the problems that we are now experiencing in my country, I have some recommendations to propose. Countries with increasing cesarean rates should consider taking positive steps to reverse this trend, including stepped-up efforts if rates rise above established limits. Midwives should be placed at the gateway to maternity care instead of being introduced to women late in pregnancy and grudgingly, if at all. This model of care recognizes that a woman's confidence and ability to give birth, care for, and breastfeed her baby and her baby's ability to feed effectively can be enhanced or diminished by every person who gives them care and by the birth environment. Because of this, all care given during the time surrounding birth should give the needs of the mother-baby pair precedence over the needs of caregivers, institutions, and the medical and insurance industries. Individual hospitals should consider implementing the 10 steps of optimal mother-baby maternity services, and I've given the website imbci.org. Midwives can have or must have an important say in the formation of maternity care policy. Care should be individualized and founded upon consideration and respect for every woman. When not under threat of a dominant medical profession, which is itself dominated by a powerful insurance industry or powerful hospital industry, midwives can provide care that is organized around the principle that women's and children's rights are human rights, and that access to humane and effective health care is a basic human right. Independent midwives must be able to make a living from their work, which means that insurance companies should not be permitted to charge such high premiums that it becomes impossible for them to make a living. We must wake up to the fact that it is easy to scare women about their bodies, especially in countries in which midwives have little or no power in policy making relative to physicians and the influence of large corporate entities. This takes no real talent to scare women, that is. Given such imbalance, fear, ignorance, and greed begin to reinforce each other, and rates of unnecessary intervention soar, with women and the babies suffering the consequences. Birth care must not be profit-driven. This makes incentives to cause problems, not to prevent them. For this reason, there should be no more fee-for-service payment, for instance, financial reward for the unnecessary use of a vacuum extractor. If all countries put the welfare of mothers and babies at the center of maternity care policy, midwifery would have to grow strong again. In some countries, such as my own, it will be necessary to greatly increase the number of midwives as just one of the ways to prevent complications and to reduce rates of medical intervention in birth. We'll need lots of doulas, labor companions, as we make this transition. Midwives need to have a say in the major issues surrounding birth. In countries where they currently work under the intense domination of obstetricians, the work will be to bring the relationship back to one of balance. Midwives cannot allow obstetricians to bully them, because doing so is almost certain to mean that the laboring women will be the next ones to be bullied. Attempts to make home birth illegal in any country will only distract from the real problems and exacerbate them, since planned home birth for healthy women provides a necessary safety valve for women who want a wider range of choices than their hospital might offer, and a learning opportunity for midwives to learn about women in their natural state. Home birth midwives must be able to make a living from their work, and insurance companies should not be permitted to keep home birth midwives from being compensated for their work. Home birth midwives are being persecuted in almost every country, even in the Netherlands, where home birth services have a long and honorable tradition. I believe the development of a country can be measured by the degree to which it respects the right of a birthing mother to receive women-centered birthing experience, whether the birth occurs in a home or hospital setting. In this regard, the current situation in Hungary greatly disturbs me. There, the failure to fully provide and protect this important right is highlighted by the prolonged discrimination and mistreatment of the independent midwife, Dr. Agnes Gereb. Agnes has spent more than 20 years trying to defend the fundamental rights of mother and child, and in doing this, she has been imprisoned, recently received a further 2-year prison sentence, and has been held under house arrest for the past year. I now ask the Hungarian government to intervene to stop this abuse and unjust treatment of this internationally respected home birth expert. Birth shouldn't be thought of as a money-making commodity or condition in which large institutions or governments control and dictate how women will give birth, ignoring individual women's wishes and needs. Inevitably, this too often puts bullies in charge of women's bodies, something no other mammalian species allows. Some countries have midwives who are totally subordinate to physicians, and in these countries it's typical for very harsh methods of birth care to be applied, and outcomes show this. It's time to stop this behavior. Traditional peoples, indigenous people, don't permit such behavior. We need to learn from them.
Honorable Deputy Chair, dear award recipients, dear colleagues, dear guests, dear friends, It is my honor and privilege to present to you one of this year's Right Livelihood Award recipients, the nonprofit organization GRAIN. My name is Abira Sahlani, and I am also a member of parliament, and I come from the Centre Party. And it is no coincidence that just a Centre Party member is the one who is presenting this organization. The Centre Party began 100 years ago in the rural areas of Sweden, bringing together farmers to defend their rights to their environment, to their lands, and to the rights of living in the rural areas. We have so much to learn from you, and it is my honor tonight to invite Mr. I'll try to pronounce your name right, Henk Hobelnik, to address us tonight. Mr. Henk, the floor is yours.
Madam Speaker, members of Parliament, fellow laureates, dear friends. 3 weeks ago, on the 16th of November, Christian Ferreira was shot dead by 2 masked men in front of his house and his family. Christian lived in Sant Antonio, a village north of Santiago de Estero in Argentina. He was part of an indigenous community and member of one of our partners in Argentina, the indigenous peasant organization Mocase Villa Campesina. His crime? To refuse to leave his homeland in order to make way for a massive soybean plantation, one of the so many that have been encroaching on rural communities throughout Argentina in the last decade. So the plantation owners had him assassinated. Christian was only 25 years old. Six weeks ago, on 26 October, 1 farmer died and 20 others were injured, 10 of them critically, in the village of Fanaya in northern Senegal. They too were trying to stop the takeover of their lands. Government officials had handed over 20,000 hectares surrounding their area to an Italian investor who wanted to grow sweet potato and sunflowers to produce biofuels for European cars. The project would displace whole villages, destroy grazing areas for cattle, and desecrate the local cemeteries and mosques. Fanaya is not an isolated case in Senegal. Over the past few years, nearly 500,000 hectares in Senegal have been signed away to foreign agribusiness companies. Gambela is a region in Ethiopia that borders with Sudan, with South Sudan. It's home to one of the most extreme cases of land grabbing we know today. Over half of the arable land of the region has been signed away to Indian, Saudi, and other investors who are now busy moving the tractors in and moving the people out. Ethiopia is a country which is in the midst of a severe food crisis and is heavily dependent on food aid to feed its people. Yet the government has already signed away about 10% of the country's entire agriculture area to foreign investors to produce commodities for the international market. Earlier this year at Grain, we were involved in the production of a video on the situation of the indigenous Anuak people of Gambela, who now face losing their farms, their villages, and their ancestral territories. We wanted to help raise their voices to the international level and express their concerns. But in the video, We had to distort their voices and hide their faces to protect them from backlash at the Ethiopian government. One could go on with many more examples of how people who just want to grow food and make a living from the land are being expelled, criminalized, and sometimes killed to make room for the production of commodities and often someone else's wealth. Today, we are witnessing no less than frontal assault on the world's peasantry. This is not only happening in the global south. Here in the European Union, we have lost around 3 million farms since 2003. This amounts to a loss of 1/5 of all our farms in just 8 years. Living from the land is becoming more difficult and in many parts of the world more dangerous by the day. Peasants who have been feeding the world for thousands of years, and still are now increasingly being cast as backwards, inefficient, and obstacles to development. The not so subtle message is they should cease to exist. My organization, GRAIN, was established 20 years ago with the main concern to stop the erosion, the destruction of the world's agricultural biodiversity and the people traditional knowledge associated with it. We learned, however, that the problem was not so much the loss of indigenous seeds and breeds as it was about the loss of the people who create, nurture, and sustain that diversity. Genetic erosion, as we called it then, is really just a consequence of a larger development that is promoting industrial farming and leading to the annihilation of the world's rural people. But these people all over the world are fighting back. In all corners of the globe, there are dynamic movements of resistance and rebuilding where people are struggling to hold on to their territories and keep control over their own resilient food systems. Via Campesina, the international peasants' movement has called today, the 5th of December, the International Food Sovereignty Day to cool down the earth. Right now, Via Campesina members and their allies are out in the streets of Durban, South Africa, protesting about the negotiations over false solutions to climate change, which are happening there right now, and insisting that small farmers can not only cool the world, but they can feed it too. And they are right. The basic idea of food sovereignty, as Via Campesina has articulated it, is that the aspirations and the needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food should be at the heart of our food systems, rather than the demands of the transnational corporations. It prioritizes local food production, it is based on agroecology and family farming, and it is oriented towards local markets. It keeps seeds and biodiversity in the hands of farming communities, and it keeps it GMO-free. It nurtures and builds on indigenous knowledge of soils, seeds, and farming systems. It recognizes and builds on the crucial and central role of women in farming. The world desperately needs food sovereignty. It is our best hope to solve the current planet's most pressing crisis. Today, over 1 billion people on this planet do not have enough to eat. Around 80% of these people are food producers living in the countryside. This intolerable situation is not due to the lack of food production or the lack of technology. It is due to governmental policies that deliberately replace peasant agriculture with an industrial industrial model driven by the needs of transnational corporations. This model produces commodities for the global market. It does not and it cannot feed people. We are all acutely aware of the climate crisis. But how many people realize that the current industrial food system contributes to about 50%, half of all the global greenhouse gas emissions today? You get this figure if you add up the emissions from agriculture itself, plus the change in land use, when forests are plowed under to make turned into plantations, plus the enormous distances, the energy wasted in the enormous distances that food today has to travel, food and feed, across the world, plus the energy that goes into processing and freezing for an increasingly industrialized food system, plus the waste of energy and food in the increasingly centralized supermarket chains. If you add up all these different elements of the food chain today, you come to the total sum of about half of all the greenhouse gases in the world come from the food system. Still, in Durban, today, this week, agriculture is not centrally on the agenda. Food sovereignty, which prioritizes agroecological farming and local markets, can massively reduce the emissions. Grain has calculated that just by focusing on soil fertility restorations, soil building, we could offset between 1/4 and 1/3 of all current global annual gas emissions. 1/4 and 1/3 of greenhouse gases could be built back into the soil by just paying attention to sustainable agriculture, by just building soil fertility. Small farmers can indeed cool the world. They can also feed the world. Earlier this year, the United Nations Special Rapporteur to the Right to Food presented a report showing that agroecology, if sufficiently supported, can double food production in entire regions within 10 years. Double food production within 10 years, while mitigating climate change and alleviating rural poverty at the same time. Others have shown that policies oriented towards promoting local markets, short circuits and peasant farming all help to do the same. The issue is as simple as keeping food and food production in the hands of people rather than in the hands of corporations. Still, peasants, fishers, fisherfolk, pastoralists and other food producers have never been more in danger of extinction than today. Never before has so much money gone into the industrial food system. The last decade has witnessed a spectacular increase in speculation on the food commodity markets, sending up food prices everywhere. With today's global financial and economic crisis, speculative capital is searching for safe places to multiply. Food and farmland are such places. Everybody has to eat is the new mantra preached in boardrooms, in corporate boardrooms. The race is on to take control over the world's food-producing resources: seeds, water, and land, as well as the global distribution of food. And today, much of these resources are in the hands of the poor. For example, 90% of India's milk market, the milk market in India, which is the biggest in the world, is in the hands of millions of small dairy farmers and vendors who collect milk and bring it fresh to the consumers in the towns. These are the kinds of markets that corporations, banks and investors now want to take over. Money is also flowing directly into farming and land acquisitions, buying up land. Banks, investment houses and pension funds are actively buying up farmland all over the world. The data on the contracts are very hard and difficult to get hold of, but current estimates are that between 60 and 80 million hectares of land have fallen under control of foreign investors for the production of food in the last few years only, worldwide. This is equal to half the land, the farmland, of all of the European Union. And this happened in the past few years only. Most of this is happening in Africa, where people's customary rights to land are being grossly ignored. This latest trend in land grabbing is only one part of a larger attack on land, territories and resources. Land grabs for mining, tourism, biofuels and the construction of infrastructure projects, timber and now, more recently, also carbon trading, are all part of the same processes turning farmers into refugees on their own land. There is much to be done. But Grain would like to use this opportunity here in the Swedish Parliament to call for one specific action. We want an immediate end to the global farmland grab. Today, an urgent and massive recall of land grabbers, like what the food safety authorities do when they want to try to get contaminated food out of the system. We call on everyone to do whatever is possible to stop the international flow of money for global acquisitions of farmland, and to restitute these lands to all affected rural communities. Stopping land grabbing is not just about what's legal. It's about what's just. Here in Sweden, people can start by taking on companies like Black Earth Farming, which have bought or leased farmland overseas. They're not allowed to do this in Sweden, and they should not be permitted to do so abroad. Campaigns can be launched to pressure Sweet Fund, which is using taxpayers' money to finance the land grabber ADAX in Sierra Leone. The Swedish pension fund, AP2, is also going into the global farmland acquisitions as a new strategy to supposedly protect the retirement savings of working Swedes. Swedish development aid projects ought to be scrutinized, as we have already indications that some of them are promoting land grabbing activities in Mozambique and elsewhere. Such actions and campaigns are already brewing in other parts of Europe and in the United States. They should be strengthened and they should be supported to stop land grabbing at the very source. Ladies and gentlemen, rural communities have fed the world for millennia. Today, the massive expansion of large-scale industrial farming is destroying our capacity to move on and to feed the world. At Grain, we will continue exposing what is going wrong while fighting for an equitable, just and sustainable food system, together with peasant organizations and other social movements. This award gives this struggle a tremendous boost. We see it not only as an acknowledgement of our work, but also as a powerful recognition of the contribution of countless people and organizations engaged in the struggle for genuine community-based food sovereignty. Together, we will continue this struggle. We have no other option if we are to survive on this planet with some dignity. Thank you very much for this award and for your attention.
My name is Eva Olofsson. I'm a member of the parliament for the Left Party in Sweden. Chad is a country almost 3 times as big as Sweden, but with approximately the same size of population, about 9 million. It's a country where the people have lived with civil war for over 40 years, and where many are still living in fear and often harsh condition. As one of the few women lawyers in Chad, Jacqueline Moudeina gives much of her time to her local NGO, the Association for the Promotion and Defense of Human Rights, where she works with issues from the grassroots level and up to the international level. How she managed to do everything from saving individual children from slave labor to fighting against impunity is hard to understand, especially since she has been under threat herself for so many years for what she does. Chad is situated at the very heart of the African continent, and she acts and speaks with a very big heart. We are looking forward to hearing you speak directly to us, Jacqueline Moudeina. The floor is yours.
Madame la Présidente, honorables Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi tout d'abord de vous remercier très sincèrement pour l'insigne honneur que vous me faites en me décernant ce prix Right Livelihood Award. Cette distinction m'honore particulièrement et au-delà récompense tous les défenseurs des droits humains dans le monde et en Afrique en particulier. Soyez assurés que c'est un signe très encourageant pour nous, les défenseurs des droits humains, et surtout pour nous les femmes qui nous battons au quotidien dans des conditions très difficiles, parfois même au péril de nos vies, dans un monde où le pouvoir se conjugue au masculin. Ce prix nous donne le courage de continuer nos divers combats sur un chemin semé d'embûches. Défendre les victimes est dans mes gènes. Je suis une révoltée, une indignée de la première heure et je ne supporte pas l'injustice. Ce sentiment a toujours été présent en moi et le restera tant que ceux qui souffrent de l'injustice seront ignorés de leurs dirigeants et tant que la justice sera sélective. Beaucoup ont essayé de m'empêcher de travailler. Beaucoup ont essayé de m'intimider, de me menacer psychologiquement et physiquement. Mais moi, j'ai compris, comme le disait Albert Camus, qu'il ne suffit pas de dénoncer l'injustice. Il faut donner sa vie pour la combattre. Or, jusqu'à présent, aucun n'a réussi à me décourager, personne n'a eu raison de moi et je continuerai mon combat. Madame la Présidente, Mesdames et Messieurs, je vais profiter de cette occasion pour vous entretenir sur l'un des aspects de notre engagement pour les droits humains, la lutte contre l'impunité. Il est indéniable que depuis 20 ans, la communauté internationale a donné un élan remarquable à la lutte contre l'impunité des grands criminels. Mais en Afrique, il reste beaucoup à faire. Dans ce continent, l'impunité est un cancer qui, avec son corollaire, la corruption, gangrène notre continent et nous empêche d'exprimer notre véritable potentiel. Nous, membres de la société civile, luttons pour endiguer ce cancer, de Tunis à Harare, de Dakar à Khartoum, en passant par Abidjan, Tripoli et Djamena. Pourtant, cette justice dont je vous parle n'est pas une science en devenir. Ce n'est pas une utopie. C'est la plus fondamentale des justices, la justice pénale. celle qui permet aux victimes de se laver des pires horreurs, celle qui rend aux hommes torturés leur dignité et aux femmes abattues leur vaillance. Il suffit de regarder notre lutte pour traduire en justice l'ancien dictateur de mon pays, Hissène Habré, pour comprendre qu'aujourd'hui, au XXIe siècle, plus de 60 ans après le procès de Nuremberg, il est encore parfois plus aisé d'opprimer que de contenir, d'exercer un acte de violence qu'un acte de justice. Habré a dirigé le Tchad de 1982 à 1990 jusqu'à son renversement et son exil au Sénégal. Durant son règne, des atrocités ont été commises à grande échelle. Des vagues d'épuration ont terrassé des groupes ethniques et la torture a été institutionnalisée. En 1992, une commission d'enquête a estimé que son régime était responsable de la mort de plus de 40 000 personnes et de la disparition des milliers d'individus, laissant seuls d'innombrables veuves et orphelins. Les victimes du régime de Habré, que je défends, bataillent sans relâche depuis 21 ans pour que justice leur soit rendue. Mais jusqu'à présent, leur lutte reste inachevée. Avant de quitter le pouvoir, Hissène Habré a vidé le trésor national du Tchad et a dépensé cet argent au Sénégal à bon escient, où il est parvenu à se tisser un puissant réseau de protection. Et c'est ainsi qu'au lieu de voir leur cause entendue, le Sénégal et l'Union africaine ont soumis ces victimes à ce que l'archevêque Desmond Tutu et 117 associations de 25 pays d'Afrique ont dénoncé à juste titre comme un interminable feuilleton politico-judiciaire. Je dirais même plus, un véritable chemin de croix pour les victimes. En janvier 2000, nous avons porté plainte contre Hissène Habré au Sénégal où il vit. Un mois plus tard, la décision d'un juge sénégalais d'inculper Habré avait suscité en nous un réel espoir. Mais suite à des immixtions politiques dénoncées par les Nations unies, les tribunaux sénégalais se sont déclarés incompétents. Les victimes se sont alors tournées vers la Belgique, qui leur ouvrit une porte vers la justice. Après 4 ans d'enquête, un juge belge a lancé un mandat d'arrêt international contre Habré en 2005. Les victimes ont senti à nouveau un réel espoir de voir Hissène Habré traduit en justice pour ses crimes. Mais encore une fois, les victimes ont été déçues car le Sénégal a refusé d'extrader Habré vers la Belgique. En mai 2006, le Comité des Nations unies contre la torture a condamné le Sénégal pour son immobilisme et lui a demandé de poursuivre ou d'extrader l'ancien dictateur tchadien. En juillet 2006, les chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine ont donné mandat au Sénégal pour qu'il juge Habré au nom de l'Afrique. Ce fut un nouveau pas en avant. Mais notre nouvel espoir de voir Habré jugé a été éphémère. Pendant 4 ans, le Sénégal a conditionné le début des enquêtes au versement par la communauté internationale de l'intégralité des fonds nécessaires pour le procès. Quand la communauté internationale s'est engagée à faire le versement, le président Abdoulaye Wade du Sénégal a soudainement refusé d'exécuter le mandat de l'Union africaine et en juin 2011 a finalement déclaré que le Sénégal ne jugerait pas Hissène Habré. Depuis, la Belgique, que je tiens à remercier au nom de toutes les victimes, a réitéré sa demande d'extradition. Mais maintenant, l'Union africaine nous parle d'envoyer Habré au Rwanda et de tout recommencer. Quelle ignominie, quelle perte de temps, alors même que les victimes survivantes s'éteignent les unes après les autres. Plus d'une dizaine de victimes nous ont quittés rien que cette année. Un transfert au Rwanda entraînerait encore de nombreuses années d'attente, le temps que ce pays se dote des législations adéquates, mène l'enquête et demande l'extradition de Habré, tandis qu'un jugement en Belgique pourrait s'organiser rapidement. Il s'agit là d'une nouvelle manœuvre dilatoire de l'Union africaine, institution dont l'engagement contre l'impunité est remis en cause. Mis à part quelques exceptions, les dirigeants africains qui disent vouloir s'affranchir de la tutelle des tribunaux internationaux et des demandes d'extradition des pays occidentaux ont montré qu'ils ne formaient qu'un syndicat des chefs d'État veillant à leur propre impunité. Il est maintenant temps que le Sénégal accorde aux victimes la justice qu'elles réclament en extradant Habré en Belgique pour qu'il y soit jugé. Les victimes ne peuvent plus attendre. Psychologiquement et physiquement, elles ont subi de très lourds traumatismes qui altèrent leur lucidité au fil des ans. Le gouvernement du Tchad lui-même, en juillet dernier, a demandé, et je cite, que soit privilégiée l'option de l'extradition de Habré vers la Belgique pour y être jugé. Pourquoi le président Ouad nous refuse-t-il la justice? Pourquoi l'Union africaine ne se montre-t-elle pas à l'écoute des victimes? Pourquoi le Sénégal et l'Union africaine ne soutiennent pas la position du Tchad, pays le plus intéressé dans cette affaire de voir Habré traduit en justice en Belgique? Je profite de cette occasion aujourd'hui pour porter le cri des victimes et pour appeler le Sénégal à extrader Habré en Belgique, pour qu'enfin les victimes obtiennent justice. Seulement, il ne s'agit pas de juger un seul homme, mais un des régimes les plus tyranniques du siècle dernier, certes identifié en la personne de Habré. Aussi, nous n'avons pas oublié les complices de Habré, ces bourreaux qui ont exécuté les ordres de l'ancien dictateur. Ces ex-agents de la terrible police politique de Habré, connus sous le nom de la Direction de la documentation et de la sécurité, DDS, doivent eux aussi répondre des crimes commis devant les juridictions tchadiennes et être renvoyés de la fonction publique. Ceci était déjà une des plus grandes recommandations de la commission d'enquête en 1992. Certains bourreaux continuent de nous hanter en nous narguant et en nous menaçant dans notre vie quotidienne. Mais nous ne laisserons pas tomber ce combat. J'ai moi-même été visée en 2001 pour mes actions dans l'affaire Habré. Lors d'une marche pacifique en faveur de la démocratie, un détachement de la police a tenté de m'assassiner avec une grenade. Son commandant n'était autre qu'un ancien tortionnaire contre lequel les victimes avaient lancé une procédure judiciaire au Tchad. Cet événement témoigne des vertus pédagogiques d'un procès. Comment cet ancien tortionnaire peut-il encore croire que l'arme du dictateur est plus forte que le marteau du juge? Malgré cette tentative d'assassinat, je ne me suis jamais relâchée et je continuerai mes efforts jusqu'à ce que Habré et les autres bourreaux soient jugés. Madame la Présidente, Mesdames et Messieurs, l'enjeu du combat que nous menons au-delà du jugement d'un individu est celui de l'union nationale pour une paix durable dans mon pays. Aujourd'hui, le jugement de Hissène Habré et de ses complices permettrait aux victimes tchadiennes d'entamer enfin la reconstruction de leur nation. Et c'est seulement à l'issue de ce processus que le peuple tchadien pourra renforcer sa cohésion nationale et connaître une renaissance. Si face à l'impunité des grands dirigeants, la justice n'a été pendant longtemps qu'une chimère, ce prix dont vous m'honorez aujourd'hui est un hommage à des milliers de victimes, de veuves et d'orphelins. Et c'est à ces personnes que je dédie ce prix. Nous ne baisserons pas les bras et cette récompense nous donne raison et nous encourage à continuer davantage notre lutte contre l'impunité. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
We'll wait for the screen. Madam Deputy Speaker, members of Parliament, laureates, and all other guests. My name is Bodil Ceballos, and I'm a member of Parliament for the Green Party. And as a Green Party member, I'm very honored to have the possibility to introduce Mr. Huang Ming. We share the same goal. We want to protect this planet so future generations can live on it also in the future. As we heard before, Huang Ming is today among the world leaders in solar thermal energy. Living in a country with huge needs of energy, huge emissions, and at the same time a country with a key role in the ongoing climate negotiations, his work becomes even more important. He shows us that it's possible to build a society without fossil fuels. What's needed is political will of the world's leaders. Maybe you don't believe that, or maybe you don't think it, but China signed the Kyoto Protocol already in 1998 and ratified it in 2002. And recently we have got very good and positive signals from Durban that China do not close the doors for legally binding climate commitments. Let's hope more of the world's leaders and key actors come to the same conclusions. And with that said, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Huang Ming. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Madam Speaker, members of Parliament, fellow heritage friends. It's my great honor to be chosen as Right Livelihood Award. It's the first Chinese people to get that reward. By choosing us, I think you recognize our Chinese people as the great achievement in solar industry, in the promotion of energy saving and energy efficiency, and so on. In this 10 years and maybe 20 years, China has become the biggest producer and market of solar thermal, solar heating, the biggest producer of solar photovoltaic industry, and also the biggest new energy-saving buildings construction site in the world. Along with its the name of most fast developing countries in the world. I'm very grateful to the foundation, to the Parliament, to our colleagues, friends, to everybody who support us in this great cause towards renewable energy world. And I'd like to be gratitude to my colleagues in International Solar Society, so who give me a lot of support and understanding. So people will wonder why I'm work so hard in promoting solar and renewable energy in worldwide. In 1981, after graduated from Petroleum University, China. I was assigned as a research fellow for oil drilling equipment. That was well paid, or that gave me a bright future. But after the birth of my daughter in 1986, I became worried, anxious, upset, and feel guilty about the next generations. Our generation grasped all the energy resources and give out big emission, air pollution and car emission and so on. So I cannot bear that. So I changed my major from oil into solar. But I could not finance myself because the petroleum research is funded by the government, but the solar was funded by nobody. So I must support the research in solar by myself. So I'm very grateful to my wife, to my children, to my child, to my parents, who give me a very good understanding. I even made my family poverty at that time. I mean, from 87 to 95, 7 years, I spent all of my family money in study, in research. So finally, I found the way out for the research. That's business, that's commercialization. And only by research cannot save the world. So only by solar cannot save the world, but solar is a very good beginning. And you know, we have this picture shows the science, public awareness, standard making, manufacturing base, and it's the hard struggle of our people without subsidized, intensive, and good policy from the government and the society. Just the open door policy is the only strong support for our Chinese people to create many miracles in these 30 years. And solar business, solar industry is one of them. And in these 16 years, after I quit my job, I changed my career from researcher as a businessman into a businessman. These 16 years, we promote altogether 250 million square meters of solar water heaters all over China. 250 million people use the solar energy. Among them, 40% are peasant, are farmers. And that's the total population, maybe around the total population of USA and maybe Europe. And I once make a joke on President Obama. If all the American promote such amount of solar energy, President Obama would win another Nobel Prize. So, but Altogether, we have saved the total industry of Chinese thermal business. We have saved around 3 million tons, 300 million tons of coal. And we cut or decreased 400 million tons of emission altogether. But it's not enough. It's only less than 1% of energy consumption worldwide. It's not enough. And so we discover or create a new business model to promote not only solar thermal, but solar cooling, solar heating, solar heat process, solar drying, solar high temperature solar thermal power plant, and other application for PV, I mean photovoltaic pumps, shelter, electricity supplying, and the lamps and the solar sculpture, so-called, and other energy-saving windows, insulation layers for walls, and so on. So we combined all the geothermal, all the environment protection technology, renewable energy technology together in one cities, in one communities, to convince the people in the world that all renewable energy, all energy-saving communities, cities can be realized without subsidized, intensive, only by business approach. So, but somebody will ask, how about the price? How about the cost? That's the wrong idea. I often mention to the politicians in Western world and the medias, you have been trying your best to promote solar renewable energy, energy saving among your countries, and you have contributed more in teacher the other world that global warming and energy crisis and so on. But you misled the world successfully to a wrong way. Everybody look forward to the support from the government, subsidize intensive, but not rely on themselves. We should learn from the conventional or mature industry like automobile industry, like IT industry. I'd like to ask a question of everybody here. Nobody, when they buy a car or iPhone, nobody will ask, is that cheaper than others? Is that, what's the benefit from buying that? Or what's the payback time? But when we promote solar, renewable energy, energy-saving products to our customers, to everybody in Western society, in developing countries, everybody will ask the same question, same silly question. Is that cheaper than conventional energy? Is that, what's the benefit for me? I would like to ask another question. If you donate to a poor country, poor students, will you ask the same silly question, is that cheaper, or will that benefit me in the future, or what's the cost? Nobody will ask the same question. So, but the challenge faced to us, the renewable energy, the energy saving, energy efficiency product will not only benefit in the future of your family, but benefit your children's, benefit our next generations. So that's not only the question of, it's not a moral question, but it's a question of wisdom of human being. Why in these 30 years we totally lost the wisdom of face the challenge faced to our human being? You know, you create, you have some people with wisdom, just like Adam Smith with its invisible hand. But nowadays, in Copenhagen, in Durban, we all rely on government negotiation, the result of government negotiation, and the visible hand. We mislead not only the world, but ourselves. So personally, I tried my best all over the world. I traveled a lot in different parliaments, in different forums, even in UN headquarters. I told everybody that the only way out is commercialization. We must learn from automobile industry. We must learn from Apple, the corporation. We must learn from Steve Jobs. He gave us a very good lesson that if you want to promote, you want to make your product, your idea popularized all over the world, just use the business model. That's all. I hope someday Solar Valley, that's very, very beautiful scenery. People said solar is ugly. Solar or renewable energy saving lead a poor life, simple life, that will decrease your life quality, low down your life standard. That's not true. So I'd like to tell you, this really the future. Your Premier Minister Reinfeldt once met me in Nanjing, in one of my shops, one of my 10,000 shops all over China in Nanjing. He signed on advertisement picture of my solar buildings. Sun is the future. He maybe is the first premier who did advertisement for a real estate company. But I think it's a great breakthrough. Every political figures, everybody should do that, not only for others, for the human being, for themselves, for their children. So you can see so many great pictures. The renewable energy enrolls the great, huge innovativities, creativities of our people, our colleagues. You see, all of these are made of solar. Solar fountain, solar sculpture, solar lamps, solar everything. So you can see, this is our future. We call that Utopia Garden. Yeah. So you can see many swimming pools made of solar, and many energy-saving windows, solar sculpture, PV lights, everything. So I think in the future, I want to copy this Utopia Garden all over the world. I hope someday I can have a conference, have this kind of meeting in micro-emission conference center. Thank you. gentleman is the pioneer of solar passive house 40 years ago. So,
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in its shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Now here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Now, little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. But here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Now here comes the sun, and I say, now it's all right. Little darling, the smiles return into their faces. Now, little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. here comes the sun. Yes, here comes the sun. I say, it's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Little darling, you feel the ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been clear. But here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say, now it's all right. Now here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say, yes, it's all right. It's all right. Sun, 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 here it comes.
Well, everything has come to an end, and I would like to thank you for all you for tonight. We now welcome all guests to the buffet across the hallway. Thank you all and good night.